Welcome to the Lomo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss the intersection of social, local, and mobile. Our goal is to help you understand these topics so you can integrate them into your marketing and advertising. Today is April 10th, 2012, and this is episode number 14. In this episode, we'll be discussing Facebook's purchase of Instagram, Google Glass, LinkedIn targeted updates, and much more. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right, man. You had just a little stutter with the date there, the first time ever.
I know. I had to double check, make sure I got that right, but it is in fact April 10th. So it's, man, time's flying. It's 1 week till tax day. Are your taxes all done, or are you still scrambling to get that all set?
Actually, I was a bit worried this year because I had sent out some stuff to my tax guy, and I was like, okay, just let me know you got everything you need. And, it had been a couple days, and then he gave me a call today. So we are all good on this side.
Nice. Well, I haven't run this by you, but I should formally announce to all of our listeners that Lomo Show is officially for sale for $1 billion. So,
no way.
Facebook's out there. If you're listening, Mark Zuckerberg, this one's for you. We are in fact for sale with a low price tag of just $1 billion. So
I think I think that's a perfect fit for them, actually.
It seems to be their go-to price. And speaking of guys that are going to have fun talking to their tax professional, the guys from Instagram had quite the week this week. The widely reported news and both officially confirmed and massively reported on was that Facebook did in fact buy the team and the product Instagram for a nice even number of $1 billion. So for a startup that's been around for a little under 2 years, that's not a bad payday, I would say.
No, it is not. It's actually pretty amazing, actually, especially when you see just how long they've been out. I think, what is it, 18 months or something like that?
Yeah, it's basically roughly 18 months. And in that 18 months managed to rack up, I think they've crossed the 30 million user mark now, because last I heard they have 5 million new Android users, which is in itself pretty impressive, since just last week we were talking about the introduction of Instagram on Android. Now, a week later, they've already got 5 million Android users. So that basically shows the incredible virality of this thing. But yeah, in a little over 18 months, they managed to go from 0 to 30 million users and from 0 to $1 billion. So congrats on them. That's quite the success story there.
Yeah, and it's not without its detractors and folks kind of up in arms. I think last week we talked about the folks who were really upset about Android users encroaching on the turf of the once completely iPhone community over at Pinstagram. Why don't I say Pinstagram? Suddenly I'm mashing them together. Over at Instagram, and it's having a similar effect here for some of the folks that just completely. It's kind of like suddenly the Android and iPhone users both joined arms and said, "We hate Facebook." Suddenly,
yeah,
and so it's just quite the interesting reaction of folks,
right? And it's there's obviously people that are really trying to dive into the numbers and say, was the price too high? Was the price rational? Does this, signaling another bubble? And I thought one of the more interesting facts that I came across, and we'll include a link to this in the show notes, but it was on the 1,000 Memories blog. And they actually did a post about the number of photos that have ever been taken, and it was looking at the various digital photo sites, and the ones that they compared were Facebook, Flickr, Instagram, and then the Library of Congress, just to give it some scale. And they have this image on there, and it's basically the size of the various photo libraries, and you look at it, and it's this giant box that just says Facebook in the middle. And then if you squint, in the very bottom left-hand corner in tiny, tiny type is the box for Flickr, and then inside of that is the box for Instagram. And, basically just a fraction of the photos that Facebook had. And so a lot of people looked at that and said, well, why is Instagram worth $1 billion? It's nowhere near the scale and the number of photos that Facebook already had, and Facebook was basically dominating in the photo space anyways. But I think a lot of people were pointing to just the speed at which Instagram was growing, and the fact that left unchecked, it potentially had the ability to disrupt the entire mobile and online photo sharing space and really create its own social network. So, potentially smart move on Facebook's behalf of buying it on the upswing and getting it while it was, still the hot property. And from what the initial reports have been saying, it's, Mark Zuckerberg's going to kind of leave it alone and let it do its own thing. And if it manages to make money at some point, they'll collect that. But I think it was more about making sure that, they had control over what could have been a major competitor to one of their larger features.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, as Mark Zuckerberg said in his blog post about it, this is the first time we've ever purchased somebody with as many users as it has, and that we don't know if we'll ever be doing a similar thing again. I mean, the only time they'll do it again is if they find another one that's as hot as Instagram, whether it's in the photo space or not, and and they'll snatch them up. Again, man, I told you, I think last episode, I was still surprised to see how popular Instagram was on its own, considering that the filter thing was done before in many apps. That Hipsmatic, I always pronounce it incorrectly, even had a very similar way that they did it. I mean, the core difference now with Instagram is that it was a mobile social network. It had a strong social network aspect to it that really could have just gone the way of being kind of a novelty, but really caught on, and even before this last Android release, we talked about how a number of folks had been using it. A number of more prominent folks, including the president and a lot of the politicians nowadays, were starting to jump on there and almost validate that there was something to be had by having an Instagram account and being active with it, and so on. So at any rate, it's surprising and not surprising at the same time. And also, again, to reiterate what you said, anything we've ever said about Instagram, for the most part, is still true.
Yep.
Whatever advice we gave you about Instagram or anything else you've read out there, for the most part, is still true. In fact, we'll see one way or another how much Facebook bolsters anything that Instagram had intended on doing or had dreamt about doing, but didn't have the resources to do. And now we'll definitely have the resources to do it. And, forget having just iPhone and Android users all out there using it. Now there's the potential to expand it to, of course, the 850 million and growing wide audience of Facebook that, is partially overlapping the Instagram social graph, but obviously there's a huge opportunity there to kind of educate folks on what Instagram is. I mean, just the press over the last couple of days is going to do enough to to show folks who had never even heard of Instagram before, but were Facebook fans, hey, there's this cool network that Facebook grabbed and you might want to check it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's fun to discuss the sort of technology and business side of things, but this is a podcast on marketing, so I think, we've definitely got some input there on what this means for marketers and advertisers as well. But I think that's, the key takeaway from this is part of our discussion the last couple weeks when it's come to mobile photo sharing has just been to highlight this as a growing trend and say that, as a smart marketer that's looking ahead towards the future, it's time to start developing a photo strategy and really get aligned on how you want to get your brand out there when it comes to posting photos and interacting with your fans visually. And I think this purchase basically just solidifies that and says, for the next couple of years at least, mobile photo and online photo sharing is essentially a given. There was the thought for a while of, well, Instagram hasn't made any money, and eventually if the money kind of runs out, how are they going to keep the servers going? And with $1 billion and Facebook servers behind them, there's no reason that Instagram isn't going to be around for at least the foreseeable future. So,
doesn't this remind you though of another surprising deal like this that happened a few years back with another network that wasn't making money and in fact was burning through tons and tons of capital at the time?
I'm guessing you're talking about the Google YouTube buy. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think it's a similar vein where Facebook imagined that anybody could have jumped on the chance to get Instagram, and that they were, now that they are to the caliber in a way, some would think of Facebook and Google as both juggernauts unto the same, even though there's obviously a difference in financials, that they had to compete for that company if somebody else, if they didn't go grab them while they could.
Yeah.
So anyways, I know we're talking a lot of business stuff and we want to get to the marketing and social media and all that cool stuff now.
Sure. And one of those is especially for folks that are sort of watching this news and saying, oh, crap, I guess I really better pay attention to this Instagram thing. If Facebook's willing to pay $1 billion for it, there's got to be something there. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are new to Instagram and looking to get started up with the network and kind of searching for best practices and trying to figure out a strategy. And I think one of the challenges is definitely for people that don't consider themselves an artsy person, diving into this app and saying, okay, how do I create photos that look good? And how do I make photos that sort of fit the ongoing aesthetics of the site? Users that have been using the site for a while have kind of established their own best practices, and there's sort of an Instagram way to take and share photos. And so if you're new to the network, it can sometimes be a challenge to dive in and integrate yourself. And it's much in the same way as early Twitter usage, and companies were struggling to understand the language of conversation that was happening on that network. So there was actually an interesting post on The Atlantic that I thought we could, share with the listeners and point to. And it's called A Guide to the Instagram Filters You'll Soon Be Seeing on Facebook. So catchy little SEO title there. They managed to get all the nice keywords in there, but it's actually a pretty good rundown of the various filters that you'll see inside of Instagram and the types of photos that they're good for. And it was, I think, at least in part, contributed to by Jessica Zollman, who's the sort of community manager, community builder at Instagram. So it definitely has, some good information there from people that are very close to the company. So just looking at a couple of these, there's, for example, there's X Pro 2, which says the effect is a warm, saturated tones with an emphasis on aquas and greens. Use this for that photo of the beach with your new boyfriend, meant to make your old boyfriend jealous. So, a little personal there, probably more for a personal account. But I think the idea of, if you're out and you're taking a picture of the beach, or maybe you're doing some new product shots on the beach, maybe X Pro 2 is the way to go. Or, looking at Sutro. So the Sutro filter, it said it's a sepia-like effect with an emphasis on purples and browns. Use this for arting up photos of otherwise mundane objects like cups of coffee, coffee stirs, coffee stains on napkins, etc. So if you're maybe you're a restaurant that's looking to post some photos, and you've got some good food-related things, Sutro might be the filter of choice for you. So it's written, it's got a little bit of a funny tone to it, but actually I think a lot of them were interesting recommendations, and it's something that I haven't seen elsewhere, really looking at the difference in effect between the filters. So you can kind of look at them, and to me, when I'm looking at the thumbnails, they all look the same. So seeing in text, like, okay, well, this one saturates the colors a little more, or this one creates a blurry effect. I thought that was interesting and helps to explain some of the things that you're going to see in the app when you're opening it up for the first time.
Yeah, or do what I do, which is just continually push all of them and see which one ends up feeling the best for the particular subject matter.
There you go. Just push all the buttons and see which one works.
Yeah, so take the photo takes 3 seconds. Choosing the filter takes 30 seconds. Because I sit there and go through every single one. Oh, let me go back and see how this one looked. Let me see if I can flip-flop between this two and see what looks good. So
there you go. I actually do that too, though. I have a couple of favorites that I tend to go pretty much straight to, and there's some that I rarely, if ever, use. Though I try to use at least a pretty good majority of the filters just to keep it fresh. But I would say, like you, a good tip for anybody out there who's looking to spice up their photos a little bit would just be to experiment with the filters. Don't be afraid to kind of poke around and see what looks good to you, and if you like something, publish it and see what other people think. And there's no hard and fast rules. I definitely don't want to create that impression that there's some sort of perfect aesthetic, and if you don't follow that, you're going to be shunned by the Instagram world. But it's still an early network, and
although you will be, so
yes,
especially you Android users.
Ooh, the Android users, they'll get shunned even if they're creating beautiful photos. Apparently, they're being shunned onto their own island. Though I think now with this announcement, we've got other things to focus on. So maybe the Android users will get a pass now.
Well, I do think that for those that are new, it is an interesting article to read. Nonetheless, it's kind of fun. It would be nice if they did actually show like some visual examples right there, to kind of play with it a little bit to show the difference maybe between one with no filter and one with a filter. They do have kind of on top a whole key that shows you what all those look like. So you should check it out, and we'll link to it in our show notes as always.
Yep. So one thing that I thought was interesting, and kind of more on the metaphorical side of things, but watching the initial reaction to the news, and as people saw this $1 billion figure and kind of jumped on the that's way overblown, and the Instagram folks basically just won the lottery, and was that deserved? And for something that's only been around for 2 years, now they're worth more than the New York Times. How does that seem fair? And there was sort of this idea that maybe they got lucky, or maybe they just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And while I think that's true, I think the thing to remember, and this kind of applies to a lot of the social marketing world, is that sure, there's always going to be folks that manage to get lucky and manage to get on maybe a featured user list, and suddenly they've got hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers, or they get included on a top 10 accounts to follow list on a prominent blog, and suddenly they've got this huge boost of followers on Pinterest or something like that. But really, that's the outlier. And for every Instagram out there that sells for $1 billion, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of startups that are grinding away the hours and putting in the time and doing the work to build up their company. And so I think while we all like looking at the recent Mega Millions lottery and the $1 billion sale price on an Instagram, I think you have to remember that the majority of people out there are putting in the hard work and putting in the time and really kind of learning as they go. And that if you're one of those people that's feeling like, I'm just grinding away here and it seems like everybody's getting this $1 billion payout, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's more realistic that you've got to put in the time, and you've got to pay your dues, and consistent and solid and well thought out marketing will eventually pay off, but it's not going to be an overnight success in the way that a lot of people felt this Instagram sale was.
Yeah, and just before we wrap the Instagram thing up, in the end, it really also has to do with how do you fit within the cosmos of whatever company is out there potentially looking for you. And so there's a lot of things that on the business end that we will not really ever know why Facebook completely said, hey, they're worth all this money. And because a lot of it has to do with Facebook's own strategy, right? And so there's a lot of people talking about what they think are the reasons and so on. And I think from a marketer's perspective, all you need to know is it's got some gas to continue driving, and it is going to continue to stay open as a separate product. They've said that straightforward, both the folks at Instagram and at Facebook. And that's the way it's going to work, versus in the past, there have been some other networks out there that Facebook has grabbed, for not nearly that much. And they've essentially said, we're sucking these guys into our system. Goala is one of them. Hot Potato is another one. Hot Potato, they're both of them mobile apps for the most part. And they were just kind of absorbed as a talent purchase. And so therefore all the people that use those networks we're a bit we're out of luck. And the folks also similar to Friend Feed, which I was a pretty heavy user on, and is still out there and it's available. But a lot of people just kind of turned sour on that network because they knew that the reason they were being acquired by Facebook was for the leadership and the talent at the company, not necessarily because the platform was cool, because in the end, that platform was a bit of a competitor actually to Facebook. So that's the stuff I'm most interested in when it comes to to Instagram, is whether or not it's going to live on, and at what form it's going to live on, and is it going to be diluted by things going on with Facebook. And the answer so far is no. It looks like Facebook is dating Instagram because it likes it already. It doesn't want to change it.
Nice.
That's a nice way to put it, huh?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I actually got a question from the audience that I'll pose to you first. And it comes from Janet Fouts, who asks, do we really trust Facebook to not mess up Instagram?
I mean, do we really trust any of the big networks not to mess up the folks that they bring on? I think out of all the companies, I think that I likely trust Facebook a bit more than the other guys who have grabbed social networks. I'm trying to think of some examples out there where folks have just grabbed a network, whether it be an Apple or say a Microsoft even, or a Google, and they've gone and just screwed up one of the networks. I think they got to play it safe.
Yeah.
I think they really have to play it safe because, again, they got them because they really liked it. Right. Yep. They liked what was going on. They had something that Facebook didn't have besides just the user base. It wasn't just to buy all those users. So my, in the end, no, I think I think I trust Facebook not to screw it up, at least for the next year.
Right. And I think,
is that a weird way of answering it? Yeah, I trust them, but for the next year.
You give them a 1 year timeline, and then after that, you're going to reevaluate. I gotcha.
Then they're going to be all zucked up.
Oh boy. I would point to, the Google YouTube purchase that we talked about earlier as an example of something that was a successful purchase. And basically Google saw this opportunity to buy this, hot upstart network and put their money and their servers and their resources behind it, but still let it kind of thrive as an independent entity. And for a long time, it was definitely successful. And now I would say they're maybe mucking things up a little bit with trying to heavily push Google Plus into the mix. But, I think still you can look at YouTube as this successful semi-independent entity that just happens to be controlled by Google. And so there's great tie-ins into Google's advertising platform and Google Analytics and that type of thing. But, really it still at its core is just YouTube, and it is just a place for videos. And they didn't try to take it and cram it into Google Video and turn it into this thing that it wasn't. It still houses, crazy cat videos and weird people falling on bikes and things like that. It hasn't, they haven't killed that spirit.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you were talking about with the whole Google Plus thing, I think Google's actually messing other parts of its business up on its own by trying to really force feed Google Plus, but that's a whole nother issue.
And so one more shout out before we move on to the next topic. This was actually a comment that came in from Eric RVA, a listener out of Edinburgh, which is awesome. So shout out to the international listeners. But earlier in the week, he'd actually sent us a link to this story and, said, how can marketers take advantage of this? And so I asked the question back and I said, well, what do you think of the news? And so he said, I don't like the idea. Instagram felt right as an independent platform. I really hope Facebook leaves it that way. So, it definitely seems like, and I would agree with this, I would say that there is a pretty strong feeling out there that the people that like Instagram, we like it the way it is, and we hope that Facebook kind of leaves it alone. And I'm sure there'll be a smoothing of the process to get photos from Instagram into Facebook, but I hope they don't do things like eliminate the ability to also cross-post those photos onto Twitter, for example, or, turn the comment area into a Facebook comment stream. I hope it sort of exists independently and, they can potentially integrate it into their own ad platform. I think that would be a potential revenue source for them, though. In my mind, when you're buying something for $1 billion, it's not because you hope to make $1 billion off of it in the next year. It's a long-term play. It's a defensive move, and so I think if you're wondering whether or not to jump into Instagram because your fear is that 2 months from now it's going to be this entirely different thing and everyone will have abandoned it, I think that it's probably going to stay more the way it is than we'll see a giant change in the other direction. I think it's, at least for the near term, going to kind of continue on and be the Instagram that we know and love. And if anything, it has this mass appeal now, and there are a lot of folks who are seeing it for the first time and saying, well, hey, if Facebook's going to buy this thing for $1 billion, then I might as well set up an account and check it out. So the audience is going to continue to grow, and as a company, it makes sense to try to figure out how to reach that audience.
We had another quick comment from another listener here live, Ramon. We talked a bit about whether or not Facebook's going to muck it up by basically changing the product, and what he basically says is that his point is that Facebook now owns his Instagram content as well as his Facebook content, so it's more of a privacy issue in his mind. And I think that some people do think of Facebook as the big, elephant in the room that is potentially breaching folks' privacy or is getting too much information about them or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that might be lingering in the minds of some folks, but that might be far and few between with the overall user base of Instagram.
Well, if we're going to talk privacy concerns, then I think our next topic fits right into that, which is Google Glass, the introduction of Google's often rumored but now confirmed project to develop a wearable computer that looks much like a pair of glasses, though it doesn't actually have lenses, which initially I think people thought it was basically going to look like a pair of glasses with lenses and it would kind of project onto it, but it turns out it's sort of a forward-facing headband that has a little glass screen up in the corner that you can glance up and towards in order to, I'm assuming, activate it and then interact with this set of applications that they're developing for the project.
It's a HUD, right? I mean, it's just a heads-up display for humans rather than for, a fighter jet or a car or something like that.
I think so, and it's interesting because I thought it was going to be more of a heads-up display in the sense that you would look through it and it would, you'd just see things overlaid on top of what you were already looking at. But from what I can tell, it kind of sits above your field of vision, and so you actually look up and towards it. And I'm guessing they have some sort of sensor that says, okay, well, you're now looking at it, all the commands are active, and then when you look straight, it deactivates it so that it's not freaking out on you when you're just holding a normal conversation. But it's actually a little bit less between you and the world than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and there's been some funny videos out there, within 48 hours of guys pretending like they're in the video and then suddenly walking into poles and almost getting hit by cars as they cross the street and stuff because they're distracted by it. I think it's pretty cool. I think what it illustrates is how all of the data that's been building up over the last few years and will continue to build up, however long it takes for them to actually bring this product to fruition, is kind of layering this, digital landscape over top of our real life world. And that's what they're leveraging. There's check-in stuff. So the check-ins theoretically, I guess if you really think about it, the check-in is meant to be like Google Plus, but they really could layer on all different services that are out there and build it into the product. I think it would probably upset a few folks or be a lot less interesting, at least to me it would, if it was strictly Google product. That was it.
Right.
I think if Google were to find a great way to be a hub, similar to how Facebook is, then it would be quite interesting. The only thing that kind of gets me about this is it sounds like it really is a product they've seen Larry Page from Google supposedly wearing it, and they've have photos of real people wearing up. who knows whether they're working or not.
Right.
But there's been a lot of devices out there that this is what doesn't get me very excited about it unless I see that it's an actual like launch date, especially stuff that seems as futuristic as this. It reminds me of when Microsoft did a demo video for Courier. And so the Microsoft Courier is kind of like a two-paged iPad. It had the left and the right side and had some really cool stuff. And it was actually, I think, probably almost a year before the iPad came out, I think. Or was it after? I thought it was before.
I think it was before, because people were sort of imagining that Apple was going to do something very similar with kind of a two-page tablet before the iPad debuted.
Yeah, and so that video was just like, oh my God, this is going to be so awesome. This is going to be so cool. And then suddenly like, no, we're not doing it. Nope. All it was a video. We paid somebody a lot of money to create this thing with special effects and all that. And so it's a very similar effect to me, at least with this video. This is a great, illustration of how life could be similar. Also, I mean, there's been a number of videos from, I forgot who it is. I think Corning Gorilla Glass did a bunch of a really cool video that showed touch screens and stuff and how things could be in the next, say, even 5 years if the cost of what they're doing was to go down, and how it could change our world to have all these touch displays. And then Microsoft even last year did one about kind of a connected world and using a lot of their technology and stuff and things. So I love those. I feed on those, and I can see that those could become reality. But when you communicate that some product like this could become reality within a year, make it happen. Don't make it feel like vaporware.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw, there was actually a video that came out today of someone who hacked together their own working prototype of Google Glasses in a day. So much as we saw people cracking together a YouTube parody video, and I think the first one I saw was like 4 hours after the official announcement. And this was like a well-produced, impressive-looking parody video. So the speed at which people are doing things continues to baffle me. But yeah, within 24 hours, he saw the concept video and he said, I bet I could put something like that together and get it working. So he took glasses that are already on the market today that have the little LCD screens integrated into them. And then he used an HD compatible web camera. And I think he used Dragon Dictation or Dragon Naturally Speaking, one of those applications, to actually handle the voice processing and computer interaction. But he was basically able to hack together a working prototype and put out a video that shows him interacting with it. And it's a 24-hour project, so there's definitely a lot of rough edges, and it's not the best looking thing. It definitely looks kind of goofy, but the technology that's in that Google Glass video isn't actually that far into the future. There's a lot of things that already do similar, if not the same features. It's just a matter of packaging it all together and getting it into a size and shape that you wouldn't mind wearing on the side of your head versus this giant computer that you strap to your face. But I think technology-wise, it's actually pretty realistic for them to say that by the end of the year they could have a functioning prototype. So I'll include a link to that in the show notes, and the listeners can check it out. But I encourage everybody to see that at the very least, just to keep in mind that it is a realistic possibility that they could have a functioning version of these things out there sooner than later.
Agreed.
So listener Dan Holden actually wrote in and said, I think Google Glasses will start a new class of location-based social conversation. And I think this is interesting because that was actually one of the thoughts I had, was imagining these as more of a platform versus just, Google puts 2 or 3 applications onto them and that's it. So the first thing I thought of is, man, if you had a little highlight notification that was built into these, that would be incredible. You'd basically be walking down the street and there would be a little flash in the glasses that says, hey, one of your highlight contacts is close by. And potentially you could get, a little map would pop up to show you how close you are. But suddenly, people you're walking by on the street, instead of having your phone buzz and have to actually pull it out and interact that way, you could just have this little notification that says, hey, you should meet this person that you're passing by right now. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of stuff outside of the marketing realm and so on, I'm really into it. And so I agree with you that it's possible and that it really should be a platform, similar to Facebook, obviously, is its own social network, but it very much has provided a platform for folks to build on. It would do, just look at the apps and look at the games, and look at using Facebook logins and stuff. We talked about it a few episodes back about the percentage of people that end up, how it increases engagement and potentially purchasing and even social sharing if you actually include Facebook as a way for folks to connect and use their their Facebook ID when they log into your site. And so I really hope that Google goes in that direction. And I know that we are going in that direction, whether Google is the one to do it or not. We are going in that direction. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, and for anybody that's like us and kind of a futurist and trying to say, okay, well, let's say these things are a reality in 12 months. How do I, as a business, want to prepare to market or advertise on these things? I would say the first thing to keep in mind is watch some of those parody videos and take that as a lesson in what people don't want the interaction to be like. So, people don't want the 18 ads popping up, and as you're walking by a store, it's just shouting offers at you. People want sort of a more natural interaction with the brand. And I think, there are potential interesting opportunities if there was, let's say, a highlight that in addition to introducing you to relevant people, introduced you to relevant businesses. I could see that being something that, people wouldn't mind if, as they're walking down the street, they could indicate specific types of businesses, and then you could put offers in front of them based on sort of expressed preferences. But, I think as marketers, we definitely need to be careful with seeing this as an opportunity to literally stick your brand an inch away from somebody's eyeball and say, well, now they have to look at it. It's like, no, let's take a step back. Let's figure out how to add value to somebody's life and how to better somebody's experience and use that as an opportunity to connect with people instead of just saying, perfect, now I can stick this giant banner ad and there's no way for them to not look at it because it's in their glasses.
And one last thing on it, because I know we have a lot of other things to cover, and you and I are both excited about this stuff, is tips for folks is to be present in the digital fabric of what's going on. So, there's a lot of kind of like things in the video of check-in and discovery, even like you go someplace and you check in at a particular location, just similar to what you do right now. And so really a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment, being present location wise on Foursquare or even on Google with Google Places, or even on Yelp, for instance, Facebook. If you're a brick and mortar store and you have foot traffic coming in, if you don't want to be present on the social web, you don't want to establish a digital footprint, then you're going to miss out on these opportunities, because what's happening right now is all of these networks are building, they're weaving their threads into this, digital social fabric that is really, quite honestly, going to lay on top of what we have today in the real world. Mobile is the first phase of this. When you go out and you check in places and all this, it's all adding to a database that, for instance, companies like Foursquare didn't initially have when they launched. They had to create as much as they could initially, and then they basically, and I know you remember probably, Corey, is initially there was only like the Bay Area, for instance, where people could check in. And then eventually they started branching out into other cities and other areas. And then eventually they just said, okay, look, we have the infrastructure available. Everybody can do it, and you can add places and so on. They were letting people, create all these digital threads that they were weaving into this fabric that's now available for anybody who, for instance, uses the Foursquare API. And so it's up to brands to be present in there, even if they don't want to, fully engage and do this, that, and the other. I mean, there's ups and downsides to that stuff, but at least be part of that. Find a way to make sure that you can participate in that. And my suggestion is, at least, for instance, with brick and mortars, is to establish Google Places page. Go check out and see if your venue's on Foursquare. Same thing with Facebook and your Facebook business page, making sure that like location-based information is there. I would say that that's something that will likely not change between now and then. And so just make sure that you're a part of that, so that when people do start roving around and using things like Google Glass, they'll be able to access information about you if they're in proximity to your store.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually ties nicely into another story that you shared with me, Adam, which was LinkedIn's targeted updates. So you mentioned, being able to connect with specific groups and specific audiences. And this is sort of LinkedIn capitalizing on some of the data that they have and allowing brands to target their updates to specific groups of followers. Do you want to walk through that video a little bit and just talk about some of the things that LinkedIn's doing?
Yeah, I'll do it frame by frame. Hold on one second.
All right.
And I think it's actually really, really cool. And part of the reason why I think it's cool is because LinkedIn has always been kind of a laggard when it comes to being considered a really engaging social network. People go there, they put their profiles up and they set it and forget it, or they are just simply piping all of their content from usually Twitter, because there's some Twitter integration going on. They pipe all that stuff over to LinkedIn, and there is not nearly as much engagement going on over there. And part of the reason there's not as much engagement, I don't think, has to do with LinkedIn personally. It has to do with the fact that LinkedIn has trained its users to not think of it as a place to really actually kind of engage with each other and connect with each other in the same way that you would on, say, Facebook or on Twitter. And so a while back, they launched the ability to have a company page that allows you to actually post. And it wasn't until recently where you could start posting updates from as a company, and it's similar to having your company page on Facebook or a brand page on Google Plus, where as not a personal entity, not as Adam or Corey, but as Secret Sushi or as Coca-Cola or whomever as the brand, you would be able to post updates. So what they've launched now is so you could follow companies. So that's one of the things that businesses are not really pushing too much. They say follow us on Facebook, check out our videos on YouTube and subscribe to us, follow us on even Google and Twitter, but you rarely see companies say anything about following us on Google. Mm-hmm. And I will say, on LinkedIn, and I will say that it is more for the B2B types. It's definitely more for B2B. If you're going to engage with a B2C in a B2C way, it's going to be Facebook likely that you're going to do, or Google Plus or Twitter. But for the B2B type companies, LinkedIn is a viable place to follow folks and to get information on those companies and to see what they're up to, and for you to use it as a channel to engage and such. So at any rate, the new feature is that now with these status updates that you can post, there's two things that they've added. One is that you can just simply post an update to everybody, and it means it's visible to everybody. Or you can actually target it, and the targeting is very LinkedIn centric. You can target it by seniority. You can target it by, for instance, size of the company. So initially you're choosing the company size. So meaning that whomever is following your company, what's the size of the company that they happen to be in? Mm-hmm. And then it goes down from there and says, what's their seniority? What is their, I'm trying to remember what some of the other things, something around position, I think, at the company, things like that. And it lets you really target the message so that you do not, you don't overstay your welcome by posting tons and tons of information to the broad audience. You really think about who it is that you're reaching out to. And the second part to that all is that they provide metrics. So they provide, similar to what Facebook does, in showing you, for instance, how engaged were folks, how many impressions were there, how many shares were there, all those types of engagement metrics that really, once introduced to Facebook, made it extremely just infinitely more useful to be able to tell what was going on. When you post something, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? And almost the same thing, if you post and there is no share and there is no like and there's no comment, does that mean nobody saw it? And that's not the case. And you won't know that unless you see those metrics. And Facebook exposed those metrics and made you feel a little bit more comfortable that, hey, even though folks are not engaging with this, there's the potential that X amount of percent or X amount of people have actually seen this come through their stream and or just read it and haven't engaged with it. And now LinkedIn is providing very, very similar metrics, and they give you kind of an overview to give you an idea of, these were the metrics you got. And remember, by the way, this was the segment of folks that you sent it out to using the targeting. So I want to see LinkedIn push this stuff more. I want to see them go farther with what they're doing, because I really, really think it would be exciting to see LinkedIn become an even more viable network for engagement than it really is right now, and that it's seen to be right now. And so in order for that to happen, I think they still need to push this a little bit farther. But we need to see more B2B companies, I think, integrate this into their site and see how many folks start to follow them and become interested in seeing, well, what are these folks going to talk about over here on LinkedIn? There's a lot of people, Corey, that don't spend time on Facebook. They might be connected there. They might look at photos, but they don't actually engage with people on Facebook. I talk to a lot of folks, places where I've spoken and taught, and folks are not as interested potentially. They're really just professional folks, the older folks. They want to just stick with, for instance, LinkedIn, as long as it's going to help them stay connected to folks in business, keep their job, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say that, I've been actually surprised by the response from sharing content on LinkedIn. So it's not the sexiest social network. It's not the one that's always in the headlines, but on one of my sites, I do actually have a share on LinkedIn button, and it's content that caters more towards the professional and the marketer and the advertiser, and people do in fact use it, and it actually does generate traffic. And so I think people are quick to jump to, we've got to create this community on Facebook. And sometimes, it's the joke that LinkedIn is sort of the place you go when you get fired and you're looking for your next job. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there is a large group of folks that use LinkedIn on a daily basis, or at least a frequent basis, and they're going there to find more professionally focused content. And so if you can start to be the company that's sharing valuable insight and doing so in an intelligent way, and if this targeting allows you to do that, so you can create content that's actually micro-targeted at very specific audiences and hit that audience with that message without having to also, while you're at it, kind of spam your other users, I think that's perfect. And this is something that, I'm a little frustrated and surprised that Facebook still hasn't fixed and added a way to better target your Facebook messages. But LinkedIn is sort of showing the way here and saying, hey, if you want to target content, here's a great network to do it. And, if you're trying to sell sort of a mass market consumer product, maybe this isn't the perfect audience. But if you're a business to business company, or if you're a company that sells a more professionally targeted product, then I would say definitely pay attention to LinkedIn and see how this new targeted update could play into your overall content strategy.
Yeah, I think they are slowly finding themselves needing to train users. When I say they, I mean LinkedIn, because for so long they were that kind of really the first real important professional social network, and they didn't have any engagement stuff. And so it's going to take some time. But I think that if people were to go to LinkedIn, they'd be pretty surprised at how many tools that they provide actually to, for instance, pull information from LinkedIn into your website using social plugins similar to what Facebook has. And so this is just another whole step up. I'll be honest, even with us, I haven't spent nearly as much time as I think could be warranted in LinkedIn, actually actively marketing and actively using it as a way to engage with folks. I've been sharing more content in LinkedIn as of lately, and seeing some more engagement from it, but it's far less frequent. I mean, if I share the same amount of content in LinkedIn as I do on Twitter, and specifically, I mean, regular content that I find that I feel is valuable to the folks who are connected with me, 3, 4, 5 tweets a day of hand-picked content that either we produce or that I find interesting out there, I will see far less engagement on LinkedIn than I do on Twitter. And there really isn't a reason why that should be the case. And so I'm really eager to see that change on LinkedIn, because I think that there's a lot of promise locked in there. And so this kind of step up with this targeting is a big deal. And I think people should experiment with it. It's rolling out, unfortunately, because I immediately went and was like, let's do this. Let's try it. And they have a little thing at the bottom of the video that says, we're rolling this out. Please be patient. It'll be there. So I don't know whether that rollout is going to be a week or 6 months. But I'd say, go spruce up your company page. There's a lot of stuff you can add there, and try to start actively using it as a means to communicate with folks on LinkedIn, especially if you're a B2B company.
Yeah, I agree. So kind of an article that serves as follow-up to an earlier topic that we discussed, which we discussed the idea that companies in the retail space were struggling and were sort of facing the need to reevaluate their position in the marketplace and look for, cost-cutting measures. And we discussed how Best Buy was actually closing down some of their lower-performing retail spaces and instead opening up these mobile kiosks. But actually, an article came out in the New Yorker recently, which seemed initially to kind of counteract that. And the title of the article is "The More the Merrier." And basically what it was is a study of a few different retail companies. And one that they highlight is a company called Uniqlo. I hope I pronounced that right. It's a Japanese fashion chain, so I probably butchered the name. But they actually found that for Uniqlo specifically, the more salespeople that they hired, the more revenue they were bringing in, and not just overall, which seems to make sense. The more people you have out there selling stuff, the more money you're going to bring in, but actually on a per salesperson basis. So the more salespeople they had on the floor, it was exponentially, or not exponentially, but it was, a multiplier on their sales. So it wasn't for every extra salesperson they had a 1x on sales. They were getting, larger increases in sales the more people they could get on the sales floor. And so when I read this, my initial thought was, well, that seems to counteract this idea that the retail space is dying and that companies are struggling to make it work. It seems to be saying, maybe instead of the Best Buy and the Home Depot model where it's let's get as few people on the sales floor as possible and kind of turn it into a self-serve model, let's get as many salespeople on the floor as possible, and let's make sure that if you do happen to go into a retail space, you're well taken care of, and they cater to you as a retail shopper. But I think what needs to be kept in mind for this story is that the people that they were bringing on as salespeople, they really focused hard on training and on making sure that any interaction you had with these salespeople was going to be a positive interaction, and you were going to get the information that you needed, and you were going to get pointed in the right direction. And I think that I've definitely found this from my own personal experience, which is that if you go into a retail place and you ask a question and the person that you're talking with has no idea the answer, it basically, it's infuriating. It's frustrating. You're sitting there and you're like, well, why are you even here? Like, if I have to solve my own problems, then I can solve my own problems, by searching around on Amazon. I don't need to come into the retail space to kind of fend for myself. So what the study was sort of highlighting is that if you're going to, if you're going to create a group of salespeople that are going to help customers, you really need to focus on helping customers and not just being there as kind of warm bodies on the floor, but making sure that you've got information on the product and that you can answer questions and that everything there is to know about that business. So if somebody says, hey, where's this where is this product located, you can get pointed in the exact right direction and help that person cut down the amount of time that he has to spend in a store wandering the aisles looking for what they're looking for. And I thought that was really an interesting takeaway and sort of a potential, I don't want to say antidote, but a potential path for some of these retail companies that are struggling to find the way could be, which would be to, rather than trying to cut the number of retail salespeople, actually increase the number of salespeople, but do so with people that you're compensating well and that actually aid the people that are in your store get what they're looking to do done.
Yeah, I mean, I was afraid you weren't going to get to it at first, but you came back around, and the biggest difference between simply hiring a ton of people, right, and what it seems that they are really alluding to is making sure that the folks are highly trained and educated on the product. And I just kept thinking, like, well, what companies out there were like this? And I think Apple, right?
Yeah.
So Apple is definitely kind of just completely, they created this store entity that everybody laughed at initially and said wouldn't fly, and now they supposedly have the most valuable square footage of any store around. They make the most money per square foot of any brick and mortar store, and I think it's usually because, they always have a ton of representatives there. They always have a ton of people. But the folks that are there know what they're doing, know what they're talking about. And it's a mix of both being highly trained and educated on fixing and, helping you, fixing your problems, taking care of what you need. But then additionally, they are very, they're very, what do you want to say? They understand their products through and through.
Yeah.
Whereas, so, like you were saying, if you go to, I'm sorry, but if you go to something like a Best Buy, that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
You get helped, and sometimes you just would rather kind of say, "Excuse me, no, I'm okay. You don't need to help me." But at the same time, Apple even has an app that they've now updated to make it easier than ever for you to order whatever you want before you even get to the store, so that all you have to do is show up and say, "Hey, here's my receipt," and they go ahead and hand things to you. So they're not scared in that sense.
Right.
It all boils down to needing to help the customer and sell something. That's what it boils down to. And they do talk about some other interesting things in the article in relations to, there is kind of this break off point where you're just spending too much time and energy training folks and bringing people in, and that money ends up being, you end up losing money over time. But that the study had shown that by spending money on bringing in customer service representatives and really focusing on education and training, that you could see a return on that investment, and that in comparison to previously, when we were talking about saying that most people just really didn't want to deal with people nowadays, customer service representatives, I think it still is pretty in line with it, because we really were talking about how folks were commenting about the distaste for dealing with folks who just simply were trying to help them without any knowledge of what was going on. And for them, they were getting that same knowledge from their mobile device in the store or the internet before they ever walked in.
Yep.
So anyways, you and I talked about it a little bit earlier beforehand, and I don't think it disproves anything that we mentioned before. I think it just is a matter of it's information, right? And you either give that information to human beings who could help, or you make sure that information is available via iPads and all this kind of stuff, which I think probably leads into our next story, if we have time to touch on it, about Sephora.
Sure. So yeah, we'll go through this kind of quickly, but looking at Sephora as really sort of an example of a lot of the best practices that we've talked about over the last couple of episodes, and rolling those all out at once. And so I actually made the joke that it sounds like Sephora listens to our show, because they basically hit on all of the best practices and the recommendations and the topics that we have covered over the last couple of shows. So this actually came out in a TechCrunch article, and it said Sephora doubles down on tech, in-store iPads, revamped website, and Pinterest tie-in. So basically, what they did is they looked at their retail experience and they said, okay, how do we take the best of the retail experience, and how do we learn from other companies that are doing this well, and how do we bring that to our store? So I think looking at, a company like Apple, despite the fact that they sell the iPad, they actually use the iPad in a very intelligent way in store. And it's a way for the consumer that wants to be out on their own and doesn't want to have to deal with salespeople to get additional information and to get more product information and have it right there and easy to access. And just, a couple of taps away, you can look at product information, you can look up facts, and you can look up tips, and you can view videos, and you can really enhance the experience of learning about a product. So that, I think, was very smart. The increased Pinterest integration. So they basically looked at their content management system and found a way of integrating pin it buttons that automatically post content to a user's Pinterest account when they click this button. And they integrated that site-wide. So every single product on the Sephora website, you can now click the pin it button and automatically share that with all of your Pinterest followers, which, given the fact that Sephora is a makeup site, it caters to women, and so far Pinterest also has a large majority of female users, this was, a very smart move and a very smart integration on their behalf to say, hey, look, this is our audience, this is what they're looking for, let's just find a way of easing the process. So I thought that was smart. And then they actually went the extra step of creating a Pinterest contest. So we've seen a couple of these, and they're all starting to kind of, follow the same path, which is, hey, we'll give you a topic and you create a board that expresses that topic and then share it with us, and we'll pick out a couple of winners and give them a gift certificate or some sort of prize. But while the cost of running something like that is very low, I think that because Pinterest is so new and because contests are still pretty few and far between, that the brands that are ahead of the wave on that and are taking advantage of those opportunities are seeing a really strong response to that and building a lot of loyalty and a lot of happy customers that say, hey, I appreciate that they're integrating into this network that I'm using and rewarding me for interacting with them. That definitely goes a long way towards increasing that interaction in the future.
Yep. And if I add anything to it, we're going to go way over time. But I think you hit all the good stuff.
All right. Well, so you want to wrap it up then? Is that the hint I'm getting from you?
I don't know. I honestly forgot to time again. So it's up to you, man.
I think we're right at the hour mark. So I did want to throw in one more, and it's only because I think it's hilarious. And we'll talk a little bit about it, but I encourage everybody to go and check out the link. So it was a Tumblr site that came up this week called Pinners Be Crazy. And this, actually, I think we've talked about similar sites in the past, and it's just something that's good to read to remind yourself of the fact that, when you're trying to get your message out there, in your own mind, the message is coming across loud and clear, and you're like, how could anybody misinterpret what I'm trying to say? And, this seems like the writing's on the wall, and, this is the best headline for this, and everybody's going to understand it. And then you look at this site like Pinners Be Crazy, and you realize that not everybody reads the things that you're putting out there and interprets it in the same way that you're trying to distribute it. So it's actually a collection of comment threads that are created from specific pins, and it's all sorts of really crazy responses to these pins. And you look through these things and you're like, oh, it's they're taking such a simple concept and then just convoluting it and turning it off into tangents and turning it into this, back and forth debate. And it's really just an interesting thing to read through. And I think it's sort of a great and humbling experience for people that are new to the Pinterest world and want to get a feel for, what happens when a large community builds up around something and then maybe misinterprets a message and takes it off in an unintended direction.
I think it's the simplest thing to do is to just basically say, go to YouTube and carve out the comments and throw it under a few Pinterest pins. And that's exactly what it seems to be happening over here is people just, you know, goofy stuff, sometimes controversial because people have opinions about things, picking apart images far more than they really should. I mean, luckily it's not as bad as YouTube comments, but it's very, very similar. And I don't actually see these comments that often on Pinterest myself. I'm very happy. It might change my interpretation of the community over there. But did you read when you shared it with me? I saw the one on the I think it was the homepage right now, a couple pins down where it's got like a couple in the background on a bed, just kind of hugging and giving each other a smooch, and then on the foreground in focus is like this newborn baby that's like a couple days old, kind of curled up and sleeping there, and there suddenly starts this thing where people are trying to decide whether it's a safety issue or not, because it looks like the baby is like right on the edge of the bed. And if you really look at it, you can see that you can't even tell if it's the edge of the bed or not. Just the baby is in front of them on the bed.
Right.
And so everybody's freaking out going, I think this is irresponsible. This couple is enjoying themselves back there. And this baby's like curled up and I think the cameraman who's taking the photo is probably in close enough distance that he could put his hand out and catch the baby if it falls. And it's just ridiculous, the things that people are focusing on.
Yeah, if you thought you were a baby product manufacturer and you were just going to put this lovely family photo up there and say, oh, you know, check out this baby onesie that we're showing off here, suddenly the conversation could take a turn, and you know, you need to be prepared for people digging even small details out of that photo and kind of taking that in a somewhat crazy direction.
Yeah, you have to check it out. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and you know, shout out to my friend Daniel Hunley. He's actually the pin right above that, which is a poster, and it's got an outline of the United States, and on it says 'America. So it's basically just like this sort of artsy take on America. And I had actually shared this Tumblr with him before that one went up, and he said, you know, I've got a perfect pin for this that I've got to share with the site. So he sent it to him, and apparently they posted it. But you know, you look at this thing, and it's sort of just this designy thing. You can imagine it getting hung up on somebody's wall and just being this, you know, American pride type poster. And then there's all sorts of comments that are, you know, it gets into, is America a country, and is it in North or South America, and what countries are in North or South America, and you know, who's Captain America, and then that dives into who's Captain Obvious, and you're just like, oh man, how does this comment string evolve out of something as simple as the outline of America in red, white, and blue?
It's very similar to, you know, on YouTube when you view a video, there's all these related videos and other things that you could suddenly bump into depending on which video you end up initially watching. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what happens is you'll find this really awkward video that'll be there on the side or be related or be by the same person that's suggested after your video ends. And you'll kind of go, oh, what is that? And then it's kind of a little weird or awkward, or it's got like, you know, animals doing crazy things or people doing strange stuff. And then somehow you click on another video within there, and eventually you end up on, I forgot what the term is, but I've heard it said a lot of times in the comments where people say, oh my God, I've found myself on this side of YouTube. Yeah. Where it really starts to feel like you end up going from the network you're in to suddenly tumbling into like the dark side of the universe, or into like the weird, crazy area where everybody who comments seems to be on drugs, and everybody who actually seems to be shooting the videos seems to be on drugs, and all this crazy stuff is happening. And so that's kind of what some of these things seem like is, you know, we're used to seeing kind of the sane side of Pinterest, and then suddenly somehow you end up tumbling into some side of the universe where you've got all these very active folks that have nothing better to do than to pick apart these fairly obvious images and create these weird threads of conversation that just have us chuckling. Oh, yeah. But I agree that what you said earlier, take a look at it and see, you know, just because you think it means this doesn't mean it's going to mean that or whatever to the folks that you post, you know, that you're sharing your content with. So take a look and see how some of those images are interpreted. And I'd say that not all of the ways that these folks are interpreting these images are sane. I mean, you know, it's not. I mean, you can't always get away without having a few insane folks getting on there, or people that are just ridiculous with their comments. But take a look and see how people are perceiving, and see if there's any that you think could be valid in how they're perceiving those, and how that might apply to when you develop images and put them out there as well.
Yep, definitely. All right, so I think we can call this one a wrap. So as always, we want to thank the audience, both those that had a chance to listen live and also those that are listening to the recorded version of the show. We appreciate you checking out the show and hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a number of ways that you can do so. Via Twitter, we can be reached at Lomo Show, or directly, I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
We also have pages on Facebook, Google+, and Pinterest. So if you go ahead and search for us on any one of those channels, whichever is your favorite, you should be able to find us. Just go ahead and search for Lomo Show. There's also links to those profiles on our websites. If you go to solomoshow.com, you'll see the links in the side, and you can just follow us right there. If you'd like to reach us via email, we'd be happy to receive that as well. It's solomoshow@gmail.com. And feel free to reach out with questions, suggested topics, feedback, or, even just to say hi. We'd love to get in touch with the readers and hear what you think of the show, and hear what you'd like us to cover, or hear what you'd like us to shut up about. So, any feedback is always welcome. And all the links that we discussed today, as well as links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes, which are viewable either at solomoshow.com or on your podcast player of choice. So if you just search around, you should be able to find a way of viewing show notes, and you'll see all of the links that we discussed today in there. And then, again, a small reminder that if you have subscribed to the show via RSS, just check your RSS feed. The new feed should be coming from FeedBurner. So if you have a feed that's not coming from FeedBurner, make sure to go to solomoshow.com and grab the new feed. And then if we have one request, the request that we make at the end of every episode, it would be that if you could go to iTunes and rate the show, it would be highly appreciated. That's a great way for us to help build the audience and just get the word out there that we're doing this show and that we're creating content that we hope people are getting value out of. So if you like the show, head on over to iTunes and give it a rating. And with that, I think we'll call this episode a wrap and see everyone next week.
Yep. Take care, you guys. Thank you.